press. Good morning. It's Friday morning. It's time for coffee, buses, and politics. I'm the ghost of Christmas past. I'm joined today by the ghost of Christmas present and the ghost of Christmas future. Right, and as you can see, don't know. I'm David. I'm joined by Alex and Martin.
I thought I was going to be Scrooge for a minute.
I don't know. I was thinking we should do the Muppets Christmas Carol or something. No. Hello, it's Advent, it's Christmas tide. It's also bloody cold, and I want to know what the council's going to do about it. And it's getting to that time of year where it's really dark, and I start to struggle a bit.
Well, maybe if the councils do absolutely nothing about global warming and about climate change, you're laughing.
Yeah. We'll replace it with flooding instead. Yeah. I looked out the window yesterday, 4 o'clock, and it was pitch black. And I was like, oh, this is not fun. This is not fun. How are you both?
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, more tired than usual. So yes, I sometimes think like what is more difficult, like going through like short election campaigns, either locally or nationally, or internal selection campaigns, and I'm not sure which one it is.
Yeah, slightly worrying that ask Alex, how are you, and the answer is basically no comment.
Yes, no comment, but yeah. Happy to be on Coffee, Bus and Politics and discuss some Cambridgeshire politics today. Lots going on.
Unfortunately, Stephen can't join us today as he is on a course today to learn how to safely wrestle alligators, and will be giving us a demonstration next week. But we thought we would talk about local government reorganization this week because it's something that keeps getting talked about. And feels particularly relevant in Cambridgeshire. So I suppose the first thing is, why would we reorganise local government?
Well, I think first of all, I think it's true to say that most people would agree. I think that we have too many layers of local government in Cambridgeshire. If you are in Huntingdon, for example, you have the town council, district council, the county council, the combined authority. If you live in South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City, you also have the Greater Cambridge Partnership, and there are other organizations and boards involved in decision making as well. So I think if you just ask random people on the street, they will say yes, we could do with some fewer layers of local government. The question is this appropriate to do now? Is this the time for local government reform? And secondly, how, what an alternative would look like? Is the alternative any better? Would it actually work any better than the current system?
Yeah, I think it's worth stressing as well that it's not just Cambridgeshire that is potentially subjected to this. I think the government are looking at it across the country, and it sort of makes sense if they're going to stick combined authorities over the top of local government structures. They've got to do something to reduce the layers. And there's a lot of sense in that, because the combined authorities are going to be the route through which government devolves funding. And that would be that in itself is very, very welcome, and arguably devolves responsibility as well. So getting rid of some of the layers underneath that just makes a lot of sense. And the other thing for me is, if you look at the history of Cambridgeshire's combined authority, actually, the way the combined authority is structured, using all the leaders of the districts effectively to make up the combined authority board, it's a little bit more complicated than that. That is the thing that has probably got in the way of the combined authority delivering more than anything else. And so working out a different structure for the combined authority that allows a mayor to get on without the politics getting in the way. And it has seriously harmed Nick, and it harmed James Palmer before that, because under James there was a lot of opposition led councils, and under Nick, he's had the same, not so much now, but in the past with the Conservative authorities. So that and using it as an opportunity to restructure and make the combined authority more practical makes a lot of sense as well. I've been chatting to councils, some other councils outside of Cambridgeshire, and combined authorities are and restructuring is number one on the agenda at the moment.
Can I just pick up on a couple of things from that? I mean, there's. Am I right in thinking that some decisions require 2/3 of approval of the board to go through? Oh, so I think there's something about the Nick is proposing keeping at least for a little while, the £2 cap on buses, and it seems like the article says that you need a 2/3 approval on the board, which seems like quite a high barrier. It seems almost designed to make it difficult for things to happen. So that seems like a problem in and of itself. That okay, the mayor has a mandate, but then he's dependent on him for implementing things on so like the leaders of the lead, whichever groups run district councils and the county council, plus the Peterborough and the business board, which seems like a very strange way of doing it.
Yeah, I have to say I don't understand like all the details of how decisions are made, because I've never been on any of the combined authority boards or sub boards or groups. However, I know in some decisions, for example, some of the the district representatives, I can actually veto decisions. So I remember in the past when some things couldn't go ahead because, for example, the Peterborough representative didn't agree with that, even if everyone was in favor, like when some of the discussions around the local transport connectivity plan. So it is really kind of difficult to get some things through, because basically you need all your stakeholders on board before you do some of those decisions. However, the mayor does have more flexibility on other decisions, such as whatever will happen as the outcome of the consultation on bus franchising. The mayor can take a decision on that on the basis of consultation without needing every representative council to necessarily agree with his decision on that. So yes, it is interesting, but the fact that we are not sure which types of decisions have more mayor power as opposed to all the councils having to be on board just shows how complicated the system is, and how someone looking at this without following the details of political structures would probably struggle to think, okay, I'm voting for a mayor, but what power does he actually have? Or what's the role of my council? How much representative power my council has on this combined authority board?
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of when I was studying the EU, and there was this nightmarish flow chart of, co-decision 1, co-decision 2, consultation, and then the whole comitology bit. And it feels a bit like that. It's like no one understands it. Lack of understanding is a problem in itself. Sorry, Mod, we're just talking.
Yeah, I was listening actually. I'm sorry, I lost my connection to the camera, but I was listening. It is complicated and unnecessarily complicated because of the way it's sort of evolved. So one of the things we're talking about, 2/3 vote. It's not just the 2/3 vote; it's the veto as well.
Yeah.
So both of the top tiers, so Peterborough and the county council, have a veto on transport issues, which when you think how much the combined authority does on transport is critical. And one of the really controversial things that happened was around congestion charging, or whatever you want to call it, for Cambridge. which was when the congestion charging for Cambridge was absolutely nothing to do with Peterborough, was vetoed by Peterborough, and it was basically a political decision. And it's things like that you've got to try and we've got to try and sort out, because one of the things, my frustrations with modern politics, is it's really, really hard for politicians and parties in government to actually deliver. It's becoming increasingly hard, and we need to change that, and that includes people's mindsets, but it includes making structures better as well.
I mean, and I think there is a real thing about just the public understanding of things, because it's like that, you know, because I'm a loudmouth and on social media, people tend to get in touch, which is great, and I'm entirely happy for that, and I do what I can. But I spend quite a lot of time, like someone says, oh, you know, I've got, you know, there's a hedge that's overgrowing a highway, a path, and then you actually have to work out who owns that particular path, who's responsible for that particular highway. And, you know, it's simplifying it and having sort of more public understanding of how the system works, I think would be good, because I think
we've had that conversation here about ownership of bus stops, haven't we? About the fact that, you know, their own bus stops are owned at sort of district, at town and parish, and at county. It just doesn't make sense. But there's other things as well. Waste is a great example. It makes absolutely no sense to have a district council in place who's responsible for collecting waste, and a county council who's responsible for disposing of it. It's a structure that doesn't work. And to be fair, a lot of councils have got these waste partnerships in place, and I think there's one for Cambridge and South Cambs at the moment, you know, to try and help deal with that. Others, like Fenland, have always refused to join them, but it just makes so much sense to do it, you know, and to do that stuff, and restructuring will enable some of that to be sorted as well.
Do you know, there's just on that at the moment, actually, I think they've all finished now. There are 3 consultations going on in Huntingdon about bus franchising being done by the combined authority, about the A141 being done by the county council, and about the local planning being done by the district council. Now, those are three things that affect each other, and I think some people might like to take the bus along the A141 to get to their house, but it's 3 different bodies, and I do think there is a problem with left hand not talking to right hand, and it is very frustrating, and I do think there's inefficiencies in that as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, we've got in Whittlesea, we've got, and it's a good thing, we've got effectively a community hub, which is effectively the library, but also our contact centre for residents as well. But obviously, you know, that's a mix of county and district council, and I have a view that you could do a lot more with it, but you need a sensible governance structure to look at it and say, yeah, what more could we do?
It's, I don't know, it is kind of maddening, and the thing is, it's the other thing you've got to add into all of that, and this is foreshadowing for something what I'm going to say later. You've also got the police and crime commissioner, you've got the fire and rescue structures, and you've got the NHS structures. You know, and then there's sort of local representatives or regional representatives of national organisations as well. And you see the pattern starting to get really quite complicated. So that's the why reorganize. What do we think it could look like? Actually, I'm gonna split that into 2 bits. What? How do we get there? What's the process for doing reorganization?
I think it has to be government driven. I think a lot of districts will fight like crazy to keep their existence, and I also think some mergers will be really, really unpopular if they happen. So the one the BBC are suggesting, which is that Hunts should merge with Fenland into one single authority, If I was a Hunts councillor, I would be absolutely up in arms about that suggestion. And there's a reality that somebody, and this has been the issue for the last decade, somebody at the top has got to say, this is happening, guys. And yes, consultation in the middle of it to make sure you don't miss anything stupid. But you've got to make sure that somebody at the top has got to make the decision, and they've got to make it happen. It's the reality. In terms of the practicalities, government have got to lead it, because if it happens at a local level, all sorts of things are going to happen. And even now, the LGA are lobbying, and there are district councils lobbying, which is why the devolution bill has been delayed.
I mean, I don't know. You don't want to select people. People in a position they think they're doing a good job and so on. But is there an element of people, particularly councillors, protecting their own trying to justify their own existence?
Absolutely, there is. I'm 100% certain of that. There's also, there's still amongst councillors this view that you could actually make the district councils as they are now into unitaries. And the reality is that the cost implications for that are huge. And as well as the practicalities, I'll give you a good example. Northamptonshire was split into 2 unitaries because the county council pretty much went bankrupt. And I think the evidence is proving at the moment that it wasn't all the county council's fault. But one of the things they did with West Northants and North Northants councils is, although they've got those 2 separate unitaries, they put an overarching trust over the top of it to look after children's and adult services, because they recognised that the 2 councils on their own doing their own services didn't work. But actually, that trust structure has really struggled as well. And I think it's just about solved now. But it just shows this isn't easy. And the best way of doing it is to make the unitaries big enough so they justify their own children's services and their own adult social care services as well. And that's the bit where the government have got to force it, because a lot of councillors, district councillors, don't get that.
Yeah, I think that's the issue with, the proposal that's been circulated for Cambridge City in itself, and maybe a little bit around Cambridge City, thinking about new, development north of Cambridge to be its own unitary. And that's the main kind of argument against for me, is probably the issues around children's and adult social care haven't been thought through in terms of how would you operate that at the city only level, and a small city comparatively to
it's also worth saying, where we have got county unitaries, some of them are working really well. Buckinghamshire seems to be going very well, and that's in its early days. Shropshire has settled down and has got a good unitary. I think Gloucestershire have got one as well, and that seems to be quite successful.
Just don't mention Somerset, Martin.
Well, I know nothing about Somerset, so you're fine. But those are, I've got friends who are councillors in Buckinghamshire as an example, and they've said it's really, really what's really reassuring for them in some ways is that the district councillors that were forced into that new structure and had to be forced into it, effective, not quite, but because they did it. It was an agreement, but a lot of the councillors didn't like it, are saying now we should have done it years ago. And that's the reality. But that's the point that Cambridgeshire has got to get to, is what is the right structure. I personally, my ideal structure is a Cambridgeshire unitary, including Peterborough. But that is revisiting the past, and Peterborough won't have it. I'm absolutely sure of that. So I think you've got to look at 2 unitaries somehow across Peterborough. And I would do it basically around travel to work areas, because that makes your economic development a lot easier. There's never a perfect solution for that, but.
So I'm on that. Isn't part of the problem that as well that Cambridgeshire might not want Peterborough, because Peterborough is kind of in a pretty tough spot?
Yeah, but Cambridgeshire should should want that, because there are ways that, and to be fair to Peterborough, it's growing quite nicely at the moment, and from that perspective it's good. The issue with Peterborough is the levels of deprivation are huge, and I know there's deprivation in Cambridgeshire, and that obviously costs, but there are things that Peterborough could learn from Cambridge, if the two were closer aligned. And if the two were into a single body, that would be really helpful. And also the drive to better connect the two would be stronger as well. And I think that would be important as well, because it would mean Peterborough could effectively and could make better use of the Cambridge economy, if you know what I mean. That's my perspective.
I mean, sorry, this is a random question. If you're driving from Peterborough to Cambridge, do you go past Huntingdon?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I would say in most cases, yes. Basically, the route is down the A1 and along the A14. Yeah. That's probably the quickest route. There's other routes as well.
Right.
And it's not a bad route, to be fair. But you've also got rail services, which could be a lot better. And Paul Bristow's campaign for mayor has picked that up, actually, and he's talked about later trains, more trains, all that sort of stuff. There's no articulation about how he's going to deal with it, because the way he deals with it is the same way that Nick is trying to deal with it, which is by getting Ely North Junction sorted. But yeah, it could always be better, and with technology, it could be better as well.
I mean, if there, let's go for your maximal one, a unitary for Cambridge. That would mean that would Cambridge City Council, Peterborough City Council would, and all the district councils would disappear.
Yeah, you'd get rid of the district councils. You'd keep, in my view, you'd keep town and parish councils, and I'd like to push some responsibilities down there. So, for me, you could take, as an example, some of the basic road maintenance stuff, potholes and that sort of stuff, and have a county-wide contract, but have it delivered practically by town and parish councils. And it gives town and parish councils something a bit more meaty to get on with, and something that I think the areas would benefit from it, because the decisions and the implementation is closer to the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to. That's really interesting, because I can see the advantage from that, which is, hi Pete, there's a pothole. Can you, and you can find out very quickly what's going on. The issue is, I can see Huntingdon Town Council being able to manage that. Would a rural parish be able to do that?
Well, I mean, they would have to up the game a bit, but that's not a bad thing in reality. I think some of them would really warrant it. I think the way to do it is through a contract manager of some sort. So because you can do a little bit more than that, than just potholes. But if every parish effectively had a contract manager, or 2 or 3 parishes together put a contract manager in place, you would still push it closer to the ground. And I say it gives those councils something a bit meatier to do, because they don't all do as much as Huntingdonshire does, David.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Or Huntingdon, sorry. I'll get Huntingdon,
shot. Yeah.
I think it's a good idea as well, because there are other things. Like if you look at the local highways improvement, I think it's a great scheme, because it gives like communities and parish councils like a voice and like their ideas through. However, we don't need so many layers. It doesn't need to take that long to get it through. And I think that's something that for like the non-complex projects, such as putting some yellow lines on the corner to improve visibility, or maybe like a mobile speed camera, or like some of the smaller changes to the highway highway, that's something that could be done, as you say, alongside maintenance and others. Of course, with more complex schemes, that's part of, the county council and highways authority. But I think some of those, I'm not sure legally what the position is because I'm not on the highways committee myself, but I see how frustrating it is when someone puts a bid in and you wait for over a year to even get a decision. It goes through all the structures with the other bigger bids, and then at the end of the day, it's £5,000 to paint some lines on the road to make it safer. So it is.
Yeah, I mean, the point about the legal stuff is, you've got to get it legally right so that you're doing the right consultations, you're doing all that stuff. But some of the legal stuff just needs changes in the law, to be honest. But
you're just saying that I'm trying to get a SID, speed indicator device, the smiley face things that say if you're going too quickly or not. I only know they're called a SID now because I refer to it as a smiley face sign. I'm trying to get one of those for the ward I represent, and that it's like, how long is it going to be from us starting the process to the thing actually being hammered into the ground? But,
about 18 months if you get the funding, or more.
Yeah.
I mean, the funding thing is a big issue, and it really annoys me how long it takes to get funding for projects and stuff in the UK. And it's the thing that drags our economy down no end, is the amount of time it takes to deliver. We were looking at last week the refurbishment of I've forgotten the name of it because I'm getting old. The cathedral in Notre Dame in Paris, and how quickly they managed to do that. And I was sitting and looking at it and thinking we could never do it at that speed in the UK. We just couldn't, because of the bureaucracy we have within our system. So there's a thing about doing things legally right and everything else, but there's a thing about making our legal frameworks efficient enough so that we can do things at pace, because we just can't.
But sorry, my friend Adam says what we need is lower paid MPs and more time for Warhammer 40,000. I should say that Adam is the person is a good friend, the person I most often play Warhammer with. I'm going round to his soon to continue the battle of the Imperial Guard. I think probably against his orcs.
I mean, the idea of lower paid MPs, I have to say, Adam, I absolutely disagree with. I would push MP salaries the other way. It's such a tiny part of our budget, and if it helps to drive up the quality of our elected representatives, and I think the same of councillors as well, by the way, I think it's worth doing. For me, councillors at the top tier, we should be paying them more and making them more professional, and having less councillors would enable that as well. I want councillors to be spending time on council business. It's the reality, and having to work at the same time and work the amount of hours they do. First of all, juggling council work with that is difficult. But secondly, it takes your focus off it. I just don't. I personally think the opposite. We should be paying our elected representatives more, but we should also hold them to account for their behaviour more as well.
I mean, on the number of councillors, we across Cambridgeshire, we have a lot of councillors. When you add up the county council, the city councils, the district councils, the town and parish councils, and I do wonder if there's, I think all of the political parties have difficulty getting candidates to stand everywhere. And I may be getting a call from the Labour regional office in a minute telling me to shut up, but that's a joke. But I think everybody does have that. There are some councillors, see on district and at all levels of county and of all parties who are great and are working their behinds off. And there are also councillors of all parties who do the bare minimum. And I do wonder if we had, more people, those positions where it's actually effectively a job or most of a job, and there's more competition for it, more people going for it. That would actually improve things. But if you could, if you could focus on it.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say something which is my experience of Finland, and which is that a lot of the councillors are absolute dross. And part of the reason for that is that that people will vote Conservative whatever happens. That might drift towards Reform for the next election. We'll see what's happening with Reform at the moment, but they seem to be continuing an upward slope. But there's a reality with that, which means that we end up with people that just aren't up to the job. And my view about political parties, I said this once to a Conservative Party at a meeting, and I got told to shut up, which was that if we haven't got the quality of a candidate, we shouldn't put somebody up. But the focus is on having absolutely somebody in every seat and stuff the quality. And what you end up with the council, I'm going to say it again, like we've got in Finland, which is just not good enough. And that's another reason for unitaries.
I think it's an interesting point around how competitive a seat is, because I also find in areas that like marginal or close, it incentivizes whoever is in power or the position to actually do work. Look at not everywhere, but like some of the, for example, now my county seat is like green Labour, and I would say like everyone is really, really active because it's very it's very close there, and I think like a lot of other seats that are not like the super safe seats, you have at least some councillors, even if they're not necessarily the most proactive before, you have a bit more incentive to do your door knocking, to do your surgeries, to actually respond to your emails. Whereas if you're in an area where you think, well, I will win anyway, that's not really healthy for democracy when you win unopposed. I mean, there's some district elections completely unopposed when you don't think there's anyone in the area who could challenge you in any way. I think that kind of leads to complacency, unfortunately, in many cases.
Yeah, I've won elections unopposed in the past. I agree. I agree with that. And the thing is as well, if it was more financially beneficial and you were more certain that you could put the time and effort in to do the job well, then surely you would get a wider range of candidates as well. And so that's a bigger incentive. And at the same time, if you could do that and justify it, and also show to businesses as a good example why they should encourage their councillors, their employees to stand for council, because actually, it's a great thing. The knowledge you gain about financial affairs is a great example. About as you go through the budget setting process as a councillor, what you learn from that you can take back to a business would mean that, if you could encourage younger people to stand, be a great development opportunity for them, as well as having a bit of vibrancy.
Can I just on that? I spend, a reasonable amount of time as doing town council stuff, which is great, and I love doing it. The only reason I can do it is because effectively my wife is willing to subsidise me. That's fine, and I'm very grateful to her that she's willing to do that. But that's the sort of reality of it, and that's not a great thing. The other thing is it might be that meetings in the evening have issues. I'm not sure it's the best time to be making decisions. Anyway, but also there is a thing like it becomes difficult for childcare.
Yeah, I mean the only other there's a flip side to that, which is with the structure we have at the moment, which is that it's impossible to do a councillor's job, or really difficult without it having some impact on your work, or very difficult. District councils in particular, I'm less certain about this with county for a couple of reasons. My view is district councils, as our structures are at the moment, and that's important, they should be having evening meetings. And the reason for that is because of the impact of having daytime meetings on somebody's employability. But they should also be doing things like, and I'm told Angela Rayner's onto this, allowing councillors to attend virtually and vote virtually at meetings as well. Because that again reduces the burden, because it cuts out the travelling time and stuff. But my view is all councils should have evening meetings, and especially planning committees. There's no reason for any council to have a planning committee during the day. You know, it's the most public-facing meeting that district councils have. And what they do is hold them during the day and effectively debar the public, a lot of the public, from attending. And that's shocking. And Fenland has all its meetings during the day.
Yeah, and also like for public engagement as well, like, you know, most of the committees or like even full council is like, well, no petition or public questions were received. Like, well, yes, because it's at 10 o'clock, like in Alconbury, like, you know, very few people, unless you're very passionate and actually want to like really protest against something, you won't really like go there. Whereas you can see some other councils, like look at like some borough councils or even Cambridge City, you get a lot more public engagement because of the timing and because of, yeah, also the location. So although I do like Alconbury, I have to say that is a limit, you know, and obviously public transport connections and the accessibility of the council. But yeah, on that point, just want to make a point on the employability and, you know, should councillors be paid more, should it be a full-time job? I think it's not only like the allowance itself and the fact that the allowance is nowhere near equivalent to a full-time salary, and obviously town and parish councils is entirely volunteering time. It's also like about like all the other things that you don't have that you have in work. So for example, you know, there used to be councillors' pensions. So I pay in my own pension through my self-employment, like because my council time doesn't count towards that, like any kind of like other workers' benefits that you get in a job, and also how it's perceived as well as something on your CV and your career. Like, I mean, I have applied for jobs in the past when people are quite reluctant, being like, well, you're involved in politics, that's not good. How you're able to engage cross-party, when actually probably one thing that the council teaches you the most is to work cross-party and to actually negotiate and have those compromises and discussions across political lines. So
the pensions thing is interesting because that was something that was ended by Eric Pickles. So councillors used to be able to be part of the local government pension scheme, and I was part of it all my time as a councillor. And what was interesting was, and I'm not going to mention a name, but there was a councillor at the time who was absolutely vociferous and hugely against it, and lobbying against the fact that councillors should be able to claim a pension because they were a councillor, campaigning hugely against it. And Eric Pickles ended it when he became local government secretary. And about 2 years later, that same councillor came up to me and said, I wish I'd done what you did, which was join the pension scheme. Because you do have to sacrifice work and sacrifice career to be a councillor. And if you're sacrificing work, it means you're sacrificing income. It means you're sacrificing pension, and so you should. And it's something that should be reintroduced.
Yeah, and also that like whatever the allowances doesn't count to like any overall, because for example, like for me, because I'm doing work as a councillor, obviously I work fewer hours or fewer days than I would if I was working, completely full time, which means that like I'm pressured to save more to like add to the pension whilst having fewer hours because I want to allow enough time for council work. So it all goes in a circle, and you can see how it's quite an unattractive option, especially for younger or working age people, speaking about candidates and encouraging people as compared to, having a 9-to-5 job.
No, absolutely. I walked away from being a councillor into full-time employment. So when I stood down as leader, I recognised that I had to go back into full-time employment. And I tried to juggle my council work at the same time and found after a year it didn't, and I resigned completely. But I walked away from being a council leader into straight away into a pay rise because I found a job. And that sort of shows where it's at, and that I think it's an important part of the debate for unitaries, is the way I put it, that we start to think about how much we pay and value councillors, because the amount you pay somebody is about how much you value them.
And I don't know what it is the county. I think the leader of Huntingdonshire district gets something like 25k for being the leader of a district council. Okay, the chief exec obviously much more, but 25k does not seem like an appropriate figure for that role.
No, and you think about the leader of a county council, and you think about the leader of a county council, and if that was a business, some of these county councils would be FTSE 500 businesses.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that and the amount you're paying what is effectively the chairman of a business of that size, I mean, it's shocking. And, similar as with mayors as well. I mean, the mayors are full-time and they're better paid. But that whole idea of unitaries, we need to throw that into the mix. I actually think you'd save a lot of money by paying councillors more.
I'm going to just pick up on a couple of questions and then move on to another topic within thing. Question from Peter. So I'll come back to my question of last week. An agreement with Martin for more professionalism and clear accountability. Simple start would be an enhanced DBS check on nomination, would clarify past behaviour and avoid embarrassment once in office.
Yeah, Alex, you might be able to answer that. Are councillors DBS checked now?
It depends on if you are, like, for example, I'm on children's committee. So I have been when I was on children's. I think it depends on on what you are, and some councils do it differently. But no, it's not a party requirement in the sense when you go for like selection. I think it's the same in the Conservatives or other parties.
Well, it's not. It's certainly not a requirement for nomination, which is what Peter said, and how you would do that practically, I don't know. But it used to be a requirement. I think it was somewhere in standing orders that all councillors at county should be DBS checked, and it was something I supported because actually, as a councillor, you should be visiting children's homes in your division. You should be visiting old people's, and care homes in your division. And if you're doing that, those people that are managing those care homes should have an assurance that your elected representative is only there for one reason, and that's to do his role as a councillor.
And what happens if an elected councillor, doesn't pass a DBS check?
Then there's a by-election.
Well, and so, but I suppose the thing is with the DBS check, it's if you let's take the case du jour, Lou Haig, who stepped down as transport secretary. Now, I think the case there is who knew what, when, and so on. So let's leave that aside because that's a slightly different issue. But she's got a spent conviction. Should she still, would that count as passing the DBS check?
I think if it's spent, it probably should. And I still find that whole thing a little bit bizarre. But I think
it is bizarre.
It should. Somebody shouldn't be hamstrung by decisions. It depends what it's spent for as well, though. But there's a reality there. But I think the judge would decide that anyway, because if you put on a register of some sort, I think that stays there, doesn't it, for as long as the judge decrees. It's not necessarily ever spent.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean I know it's just an interesting one because there's also a thing about should the public be able to elect anyone they want? Should anybody be able to put themselves forward for election? Because if we're saying you've got to get through a DBS check, you're limiting who can stand for election. But do the public really want people that have got, as an example, a past wrongdoing around children being elected to a council that has responsibility for children's services? And if they do, I think it's up to politicians and sensible politicians to sit and think about whether that's right or wrong. I know what I think. I mean, the thing is, I wonder if maybe, this is speculating. You could imagine a situation where somebody had, I'm trying to think, a serious conviction from a long time ago. I don't know. I don't know the details.
It's not necessarily just a conviction, and this is the important bit. You know, I remember as in Cambridgeshire, I've got to be careful with this and what I say and how. We had a county councillor who was disbarred from professional office because of a case, and this is his employment rather than his role as a councillor. Disbarred from professional office because of misconduct and effectively taking advantage of a vulnerable old person. Okay. Now, you know, from my perspective, and he was kicked out of the Conservative group as a result of that. I have to say, from my perspective, I don't want that person as a counsellor, where he's got responsibility for adult social care, where he's going to be visiting care homes, or even where he might be going to talk to somebody about a social care issue. I don't want them anywhere near that. Yeah. And so I think, you know, a legal framework that protects from that happening, you know, that's what the law's for, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there will always be some cases that are like, well, you know, like where the threshold should be, like, you know, what counts and what doesn't. But there's some, as Marty says, clear examples where if you're dealing with, you know, like if you're on the children's committee and like, you know, seeing families, like doing your resident surgeries, you shouldn't really like have certain things in your past, as well as like, you know, Marty's example around, you know, like vulnerable adults and social care issues. But I think in addition to this, to having this, like, I guess, baseline of like, you know, acceptable behavior, I think what's really missing from like, you know, selection process, I'm not sure how parties will be able to do that ever, is actually like testing in some way, like the skill of people. Like if it was after me, I would actually do a bit of an assessment center, like, you know, how to respond to an email, how to like, you know, respond to a piece of casework, like how to have a conversation, because it's surprising how many people actually, I mean, it takes them so long to actually have the basics, because either you win without expecting to win, or you're not trained or prepared, or, you know, as we said before, like, you know, parties are desperate to trying to like fill in all the spaces, and then some surprises happen and you end up with people who actually don't really want to be counselors, who are just asked to be there. And then it's really difficult, because they feel like, well, now I don't want to trigger a by-election because I don't want to, you know, like upset my colleagues in the party, but actually they don't want to be there. And it's really, really a problem, I think, having candidates who actually do want to be there, who are prepared. Yes, it's unlikely I will win, but like if I will win, I'm actually prepared for the role and have, you know, the time for it. Is a difficult thing to do, but it's important, because otherwise you end up with, you know, councils where only a third of the people are actually like active, and some people actually don't really want to be there, which is a problem.
I mean, yeah. I think this picks up on something you said, Martin. Political parties are part of, you know, our political institutions, and have a role in making politics work. And I don't think they're doing that. And I think that's all parties.
Oh, I think all political parties are, and party politics in the way it is in our system is part of the reason why I support a move to PR, because our political system has become so adversarial that politicians seem to be focusing more on the adversarial side of the politics than they are on delivery, and you see it in campaigning all the time. And I, you know, one of the reasons I like PR is because you will have to have, under PR, you'll have to have coalitions, and political parties will have to learn to work with each other. And I can only see benefit from that. Is the reality. I think the way our system works at the moment, well, it doesn't work. Yeah. You know, the way the Conservatives went from being a party of government to a party of blaming everything that's wrong on the current government it's absolutely shocking. You know, we should be up in arms about it, because it stops our politicians. You know, the Labour Party have been elected for effectively a 5-year term. I don't think it'll be 5 years, but there you go. from day one, because of the scrutiny that they get in the media and the way the media scrutinizes, but also the way that party politics works. It's, what we should be doing is saying, yes, we'll hold you to account for how you deliver, but we recognize that you have earned a mandate to deliver on your agenda. And we need to be better enabling them to get on and deliver that agenda. I'm not totally enamored by some of the stuff the Labour Party does. And there's a complete contrast between, a conservative ethos, a low tax ethos, in theory. I'm not sure they ever delivered that. And the Labour ethos, which is about investing in growth and using taxation to invest in growth. But that argument was won during the election campaign. And as part of an election campaign, and the Labour Party have a right to be able to deliver that, and we've got a political system that is effectively trying to stop them.
Yeah, but I think that this links back like this adversarial nature like of politics, and really links back to like which candidates are not only selected in many cases but also the ones that make it through like the first and second terms as well. Because what we're like actually valuing and emphasizing is your ability to stir up the drama and to create the conflict and do that attack leaflet and like you work out the numbers in the selection meeting to make sure that like you get rid of your opposition and so on. I think those are like all kind of like those skills that are not the skills that are used in cross-party working. So in a way, it's like I think those processes also it leads to like people who are more, not everyone of course, but more of that type of personality and inclination rather than someone who is working collaboration and cross-party and inclusive and
I mean, one thing just my experience on Huntingdon Town Council, because it's most councillors aren't elected on a party ticket. There's 3 Labour councillors, and just so it means that on committees and subcommittees there'll only be 1 Labour person. So you are going to be working cross-party, and I think with PR you would have more parties, and you would be doing that more.
No, I agree. And as somebody that is passionate about centre ground politics and the damage that that political extremes do on both sides, the other thing is that whatever happens within a PR system, you should have a strong centre ground influence, and I think that's a good thing too. There's a role for the edges of our political system. But increasingly, what's happening with our system is those edges are manipulating the first past the post system to their advantage, and they're not doing it through good politics. They're doing it a lot of the time through blame. One of the indicators that you get that politics is moving to the extremes is you see politicians starting to blame others for your failings. And I'll put it this way. This might be uncomfortable for some. You saw it under the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn with the anti-Semitism in reality, and you see it within on the right through Reform and a lot of the Conservative Party on migration and on immigration and. And if it's not immigration, the right will find something else to blame. And if it's not anti-Semitism, the left will find something else to blame. But that's what happens at the extremes. And we need people in the centre ground that can take a more objective view, that have strong influence.
I agree. I mean, you see, and the thing is, this isn't just the UK. You see this in France now, where you've ended up with this situation where a centre right, fairly technocratic government under Prime Minister Barnier has basically been kicked out by Mélenchon and Le Pen and their groupings. The far left and far right.
No, absolutely.
And you do end up with a situation where it's like, well, okay, this may be this is ungovernable.
No, but there's a bigger picture about this that is really important, and it strays off topic in a big way, but it is important. If you look at Le Pen and what they're doing around immigration, and what we're seeing in the immigration debate is a big part of why Le Pen is increasingly doing well in France. and if you look at that, then you look at the UK situation where our, the UK approach and the isolationist approach that people want to take to immigration, which is basically nobody ever crosses the sea to get to Britain if they're a migrant. And that's effectively what reform would want. That's not what they overtly state at the moment. So what they're saying is we want to push our problems onto a country that is increasingly right-wing, and we want to make the reason they're becoming increasingly right-wing even worse. So, in what sense is it in our interest as a country to want more right-wing in France? But that's the direction that reform and the edges of the Conservative Party want to push us.
So we're going way off topic. I want to pin. I just want to add something.
I'm going to have to go as well because I've got to be at my local school at 8:45 to be doing good things.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, but cheers. It's been a great chat.
Yeah. Well. Let's wrap up there, and we'll have to come back to this another time and pick up on Neil's comment. I think we'll have to come back to local government reorganisation, and we'll have to talk about regional government.
Maybe with a guest speaker. I know there are quite a few. Maybe we can find the speaker for next time. There are quite a few like academics and people who are previously in the civil service researching this. So it might be like a good idea to discuss the detail of the different proposals and how we feel about the proposal that Huntingdonshire would be paired with Fenland, which is very controversial.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. See you all next week. Well, take care and have a good Friday.
Have a good Friday and weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, cheers all.